Hey everyone, Jay Whitner here with Space Headlines. We do a weekly recap of what's going on in the space universe. And today we're going to be talking about the fourth week of August 2018. Our first story comes to us from NASA, and they're working on how people can navigate when they're away from planet Earth, where there's no GPS on your iPhone because there's not a network of satellites, circling all the moons and planets in the solar system. So how will people get around? Well, the idea that they've come up with, and this is from the NASA Frontier Development Lab, is that if you have a vast number of pictures taken of a surface, for example, like our moon, that if you had a lot of pictures, you could use AI to take a picture of your surroundings and it would instantly match it through all the different pictures that were on file, and it would say, okay, well, you're here. So this is an interesting idea and a new approach. I guess my question is I'm not sure that it's easier to collect this vast data bank of pictures than to put up a few communications and navigation satellites in orbit around the moon, for example, and use this type of GPS that we currently use. So I think that's the question. But anyway, it's an innovative idea that NASA is working on to help astronauts navigate while they're off planet Earth. Our next story is about China. China set a record with their 23rd launch of the year. They've never had this many space launches in a year. And they're currently planning on 35 launches this year, which should be a dramatic increase over anything they've ever done. The launch that you're looking at is a Long March 3B rocket. It was carrying some GPS satellites for the Chinese constellation. And this constellation is supposed to be complete by 2020 to have, as I understand it, worldwide GPS coverage through the Chinese GPS network. Still in Asia, India is in the news. They announced that they're planning to put an astronaut into orbit by 2022. This is kind of interesting for a variety of reasons. They've been launching satellites for quite some time, since 1975, and it was a high-profile announcement made by the Prime Minister of India. And this 2022 year is going to be very significant for India. It's their 75th year of independence, and according to projections, it's the year that they will become the most populous nation in the world, surpassing China for the most people. So India is clearly an up-and-comer in the space arena, and we'll see where they decide to go. Starbridge Venture Capital made another investment. This most recent one was Made in Space. If you're not familiar with Made in Space, they're the leading company for 3D printing in space, with having 3D printers up on the space station. They've pioneered that technology. And also, Starbridge fairly recently invested in Axiom Space. The 3D printing company Made in Space has offices in California, in Florida, and Alabama. And they're growing really well and have some really sort of revolutionary technologies they're working on, one of which is the Argonaut. SpaceX was in the news, and what they were talking about was, okay, how are they going to address the infrastructure situation on Mars? And this is something that they've been criticized about, in my view, unfairly, that hey, Elon, you're not talking about how we're going to build infrastructure on Mars. You keep focusing on the transportation, which to me, if you could figure out the transportation, it would be more than his fair share of the problem. But anyway, they made some announcements at the Mars Society conference, and there was a guy named Paul Wooster, and he's in charge of Mars development engineering for SpaceX. And he let loose some of the thinking at SpaceX. And in brief, the upper part of the BFR, the Big Falcon rocket, is basically the Big Falcon spaceship. So it takes all these people to Mars and lands. And the plan is that ship is now going to stay there for an extended amount of time And that is where the people will live while they build the initial infrastructure. And the comments seem to indicate that this spaceship might stay on the surface for quite some time. And this ties into some other theories that people have floated about the big spaceship that SpaceX is developing, and that this is like a sort of a turnkey space logistics point wherever you put it. So some people have said, well, we could put one of these at the Lunar Gateway as opposed to the current concept, or you could make different bases throughout the solar system using these BFRs. And that's the idea for this Mars thing. People would live in this unit while they're building out the initial base. And this would sort of support making a bigger production run of BFR spaceships, which would bring the prices down, because there'd be a need, obviously, for more of them if they're used in this way. Engineers in the UK are talking about capturing asteroids and bringing them into Earth orbit. So they would use an uncrewed robotic spacecraft to nudge the asteroid toward Earth, then use aerobraking to slow it down such that it would end up in Earth orbit. Once it's in Earth orbit, it could be pursued for scientific purposes, for logistics purposes, to get raw materials out of it through mining. And the safety mechanism here is in case an error is made and they might lose control of one of these asteroids, but there's a maximum size. So they're saying nothing over 30 meters in diameter would be a candidate to do this. So if everything went wrong and they miscalculated and it re-entered, it's small enough that it would burn up on re-entry and not hurt anyone. So this is an interesting idea that comes to us from the University of Glasgow. The last piece that we have is a story of the moon or Mars. This has been a big question in the space community for so long. Where should we go next? What's important? Should we go back to the moon or go into Mars? And my view is it's not a question of either or. It's something that we need to go to both places. And this was a nice editorial piece in Space News about this whole thing. For old space hands that might be watching, there's mostly these concepts will be familiar to you. But if you're new to this idea, the lunar poles have been determined to have a lot of ice. And ice obviously consists of hydrogen and oxygen. And it's easy to break the water into those two constituents. So to convert water into hydrogen and oxygen. So what you have is you have water for drinking, for chemistry, for all sorts of industrial purposes, and you have hydrogen and oxygen, so you have rocket propellants. And rocket propellants are effectively the currency of space travel. So by harvesting these ice deposits on the moon, you open a door for lots of commercial activity, because this is clearly a money-making proposition if it can be mastered. And you leverage more cost-effective travel within the solar system, and most particularly to Mars. Depending on the architecture that you're looking at, there's a vast amount of propellants are needed for a crewed Mars mission to succeed. And we can either lift them up from the Earth's gravity well, or we can get them from the ice at the poles of the moon. So this is a very nice editorial kind of a piece, an opinion piece in Space News that you can check out. That's all of our coverage for Space Headlines covering the 4th week of August 2018. Hope you enjoyed it. Check back with us in a week or so, and we'll have the first week of September for you. Take care.